Bringing life to faith, bringing faith to life. It seems so simple, doesn't it? And yet it is a profound, deeply engaging, powerfully empowering, and spiritually nurturing way of doing theological education, religious education. The Second Vatican Council in Gaudium et Spes, I believe it was paragraph 43, said that one of the greatest errors of our age is, now they were writing in 1965, and you'd think they'd say communism, individualism, materialism, but instead they said one of the greatest errors of our age is the gap that Christians maintain between the lives we live and the faith we profess. That gap between life and faith is one of the greatest errors of our time, and I think it still is. I first read those words back, a long time ago. I was a young seminarian, and they struck me as a powerful indictment, really, of the kind of religious education we were doing. Because why weren't we integrating and encouraging students to take their faith and bring it to their lives, and take their lives and bring it to their faith? There was something awry with how we were doing it. We were teaching them about the faith, but we weren't enabling them to integrate it, to put it and take it seriously in the midst of their own lives, through no fault of their own, very often through how we were going about it. So I embarked on trying to create an approach to educating in faith, religious education, theological education, catechesis, whatever you want to call it, a process that would encourage teachers to encourage students to indeed bring their lives to their faith and their faith to their lives. And when I was searching for a rationale for that approach, I found the most obvious one available: Jesus of Nazareth. Because that's how the carpenter from Nazareth went about it. And sometimes we don't, it's so subtle in the Gospels, you see it especially in the parables, but it's all through his whole style of teaching throughout the Gospels. He was constantly getting people to stop and look at their lives. He always began with people's ordinary everyday lives: sorting fish, making bread, weddings, wakes, sowing seed, the birds of the air, the lilies of the field, people hiring workers in a vineyard, beggars at the gate of a rich person, a person going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, a father with two sons, one of them giving him trouble. I mean, he always began with people's ordinary everyday lives. And then, invariably, he would get them to look at their lives, but then to pause and reflect on their lives, to question their lives, to probe, to analyze, sometimes to think fairly critically about their lives. In fact, indeed, at times, he invited them to turn their lives upside down, to see what was there to be seen, but then very often to see in a whole new way. So in other words, the Samaritan is the one who stops and is neighbor to the poor fellow in the ditch. The prodigal is welcomed home when he never should have been welcomed home, but the old father is in fact on the lookout, hoping for him. And when he comes over the horizon, his heart is filled with compassion for the wayward son. Getting people to turn their lives upside down. When Lazarus is the one sent off to the bosom of Abraham and the rich man sent to Hades, that would have turned people's lives upside down, because in the world of the time, the wealth was a reward for living a good life, and poverty had to be punished from God. So in other words, Jesus was constantly getting to stop, look at their lives, but then look at their lives in a whole new way. But then, of course, he also proclaimed the gospel, announcing the reign of God. And the very beginning of Mark's gospel says that he did this with authority. Well, what was his authority? It must have been his own conviction. He wasn't a member of the Sanhedrin or an officially appointed rabbi. It was just the integrity of his own life, proclaiming this marvelous good news for people's lives into the midst of people's lives, beginning with their lives, proclaiming the gospel, but then inviting them to take that gospel and to bring it back into their lives again. His preaching and teaching were always a call to decision. His whole preaching of the reign of God was calling people to make choices, to make decisions. And so he was always trying to bring it back into their lives again, getting them to see for themselves, getting them to make decisions, getting them to become disciples. That's exactly this life to faith, faith to life is how Jesus went about it. And I don't think we'll find a better approach in our time either. That's precisely what we do in the Credo series. Every single lesson begins by inviting the young people to reflect upon their own lives in the world. We called it attend and reflect. In other words, pay attention to your own life, but then reflect upon it. Then we bring them to the story and to the vision of Christian faith. And we always need to do both, because every story has a great vision to it. It always means something for our lives. And we have to highlight, as we teach, we can't just teach about it. We have to teach it in a way that they know the story indeed, but that they also recognize the vision, the implication, the application, the invitation, the possibility that this story offers to their lives. And then we constantly bring them back to life again with attend and reflect in every lesson. Every chapter does this, but every day, we think in terms of 5 days, Monday to Friday, however you want to name it, but each day does the same thing, beginning with life, moving to the faith, but then inviting them to bring that faith back into their lives again. I think that approach is most likely not only to instruct young people in the faith, to inform them. I think it's likely to form them, and even has the possibility of transforming them, their own spirituality, their own lives in faith, their own identity of Christians, if that's what they so choose. Begin with their lives, enable them to bring it to their faith, and then to take that faith and bring it back into life again. Thank you.